You're listening to This Week in Clown World with Ben and Hobbs, so sit back, relax, take your black pill, and enjoy the show.
What kind of adventurer are you?
I'm a special kind of adventurer. I don't know if anybody else heard that, but I did. Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and fellow harmful extremists. It's This Week in Clown World with Ben and Hobbs. I'm Hobbs. That's Ben. Up above me is Jerry from the land down under. Going to talk about what the hell's going on down there. How are you doing, Miss Jerry?
I am really well, Hobbs and Ben. Yes, what's going on down under? So much. Where do I begin? Where would you like me to begin?
You know, could you start at the beginning of all this? I read something the other day saying a lot of these issues are because Australia doesn't have a Bill of Rights. Now, is that a feature or a bug of Australia?
There is mixed opinion on that I'm not a lawyer, but I'll say that as up front, but they differ. They all differ about whether a Bill of Rights would have helped. Some argue that even in the US that your Bill of Rights isn't saving some of you. So, but now I never used to be in favour of one for us until the last few years, even before COVID, I started changing my mind on that. Now, this has become really clear that whether it would help or not, it will save us or not, we should have one. And the reason is there's a few things for that. The first thing that comes to mind is probably for the last 20 years, Australia, the Parliament has been ruling more and more as by decree without any parliamentary oversight. Now, that perhaps isn't any different to a lot of the 5 oldest democracies. They've probably all been heading that way because Western civilization has. But 2 things happened this past month that showed up that we actually don't have any human rights in this country. Now, one was a case in New South Wales, which is our biggest state here. So several people took the New South Wales government to court to challenge the public health orders, that they were too draconian and all the rest of it. Now, we lost it. They lost it. And the reason was that the judge said it was all about the reasonableness of the public health orders, about keeping safe and all the rest of it. Anyway, he deemed that no, they didn't have a case. So they walked out of there, and as the lawyer explained in just after the session on a video, that it did 2 things. Yes, they lost that case, but it revealed that we don't have any human rights. And without a Bill of Rights, we're cooked. And that...
So as long as somebody deems it's for the greater good, all the rights go out the window, pretty much.
The greater good, and we don't have a leg to stand on. Then there was another one a couple of weeks after that by the Fair Work Commission here, you know, the body that deals with all the workplace complaints and things. And a lady who was working in an aged care facility again, that was in New South Wales, she took the case because she didn't want to have a flu jab. So she, took it, it was discrimination against her. And Fair Work handed down now there's several commissioners on that, and the majority ruling was that it didn't matter. She lost the case, and it was reasonable to expect people, particularly in that industry, to have it. But there was one dissenting commissioner, and she, was speaking quite honestly and termed it as we're heading down a road to a medical apartheid, and it definitely has merits, and she raised grave concerns about it. 2 days ago here, that commissioner was told she can no longer hear any future cases in relation to COVID, and she needs to be retrained.
So basically, without a Bill of Rights over everything, it's just left up to judges basically the judicial system runs your country? Is that how it is?
Well, actually, at the moment, Ben, it's more the politicians, because that is what, from my, layperson's reading of the Bill of Rights, is that they say, the people that are against it say that it leaves all the rulings in the hands of judges and that takes it out of the hands of the people. Well, what has happened in Australia is very plain to see. It's got nothing to do with the judges now. The politicians have done this. And I'll talk about that when the biggest example is what's happened here in the last few days with the Premier of Victoria. But no, I think the place we're in the Western world at the moment is, I don't know that it matters whether it's judges going to be doing it or politicians, but right now it's politicians. They're almost the enemy of the people now. We have no comeback, no recourse as a people to do anything. And it seems, and because of our federation structure, the Prime Minister doesn't really have authority over how the states enact their public health orders because they're in charge of health. So that is the Bill of Rights situation, and I'm all in favour. I believe we need one, but it would have to go to a referendum, and Australia hasn't been very successful in past referendums. But of course, if we're to get through this situation, and I don't know how it's going to look on the other side because of how we are and our two major parties, like you have two, we've got the same, two wings of the same bird. If we can hold them to account with the new parties coming up, maybe we could have a chance of getting a referendum up for a Bill of Rights.
So one thing that I've noticed, we are kind of talking a little bit about the Western world, and more specifically the Anglosphere in general, the English-speaking countries of the world. One thing that I've noticed that's a little bit different about Australia as compared to, say, Canada or Great Britain is when I see these videos, these cell phone videos of law enforcement enacting any of these crazy regulations or mandates or whatever, and they're getting called out on it in Canada or Great Britain. The cops, they have this kind of dejected look. They kind of stare down at their feet, shuffle around. It's like they know that they're doing something wrong, but they're in their mind, they're caught between a rock and a hard place. And it's the fault of the public school system. I think that they don't know that I was just following orders was the last words of some very infamous Germans. However, the cops in Australia seem to be enjoying themselves
Yeah.
when they're cracking skulls. Why is that? Like, am I just seeing the worst of the worst in these personal cell phone videos, or is there an overarching enjoyment that they seem to be having with cracking down on their fellow citizens? And why is that?
I'd say those ones that we're seeing, that the images are being shown, but there are a lot of policemen. I don't have the exact numbers, but they are forming, a lot of them through the various states have left because they won't take they're mandating the jab for all the frontline services, or for everybody really. In every state there are policemen, there are fireys, there are all frontline emergency services personnel. Sorry, excuse me for a minute. Jay, just shut the door, please. All services personnel leaving their jobs because of the mandate. Now there are groups being formed, there are Telegram channels, all that sort of thing. They are standing up. So we can't do a blanket. It's that same thing, it's just the noisiest. But what we're seeing, the images we saw, the rubber bullets, I mean, that was horrifying. We've never seen that. 2 years ago, you'd crack up with laughter if you were told something like that would happen in this country. And the speed at which it has happened is so alarming. But then again, clearly this has been set up for some time. When you look at Victoria signed on to the Strong Cities Network, which is connected to a thing called ISD Global. It's a big international think tank based in the UK. Back in 2015, I believe. And the influence down there of that whole surveillance, probably from this influence of the CCP, because Daniel Andrews had a lot to do with a lot of trips over there, is very clear. So, which then would probably lead me into talking about this next biggest alarm bell that has happened in the last 2 days in Victoria, if you want me to go straight into that.
Yeah, jump right in, because we're obviously not as up on the local or even national politics that are over there, but most of what I've heard has been Victoria is kind of the epicenter of everything terrible that can go wrong is going wrong in Victoria down there in Australia.
Yes, well, they introduced Daniel Andrews. I had been a historian. I was even way back last year, I was seeing the signs and the traits of him heading to a like almost a tyrannical regime. But I thought, no, you still hold judgment. You think, no, it won't happen. We're still one of the oldest democracies in the world. But that's gone out the door. I mean, they introduced a public health and wellbeing amendment pandemic management bill. So that was adjusting one that they'd originally done years ago. And in that has given Daniel Andrews sweeping authoritarian powers. And I'll just read you the 5 main things that allows. First of all, the bill. Now, I'll read you the first 5 and then I'll tell you what has happened with it. So the Premier can declare a pandemic anytime he wants, even if there's no cases in Victoria. He can put the state back into lockdown based on that. He can make orders based on people's race, religion, gender, political affiliations, and if they breach the orders, they can be detained without warrants, without anything. They have, and then the biggest one is if people breach the public health order, they can be fined $90,000 or go to jail for 2 years. And the final thing is they have an oversight committee, which all of them do, as you do as well, but that's appointed by the Premier. I can't see anything other than that is a totally dictatorial, tyrannical grab for power by one individual. And that was given to the members, the MPs in the State Parliament of Victoria on the morning, and I believe they only had 2 days to digest it, read it all. I think it's a 150-page document. To give you an idea, any general document that gets tabled in the Parliament, a bill, that you're given, even basic ones, you're given 2 weeks to read them. If they were given 2 days. It passed yesterday. It passed the lower house. So over here in the state, the majority of the states have a lower and an upper house, an assembly and a council. So it passed the assembly, which was the lower house, yesterday, and with the help of clearly deals done by a couple of the crossbenchers, independents. And it now goes to the council, which is the upper house. Now, it will pass. Everybody knows that already. Now, what they did, the Victorian Bar Association actually spoke up yesterday, and they slammed them as draconian, dangerous. Clearly now they're worried, and they were angry because in the overview of the bill, it said that they had engaged all the stakeholders, and one of them was the Victorian Bar Association. And even though they engaged them briefly on like one area that we're going to do the bill, they weren't really consulted. They didn't see the legislation until it was already done. So they have spoken up finally. I mean, my first reaction to that was, well, that took you long enough. You didn't speak up before when it was already moving in that direction. We are on the precipice in Victoria. People are panicking. I know that because I have family down there myself who don't want to stay, and I know other people who have family and friends who are just going to pack up and get out. Because now the worry is, well, maybe he'll stop us from going in another 6 months. Maybe we won't be able to leave the state. Who knows? Everything's on the table now. This is such a concern, and from my perspective, because I've worked and done a lot in politics for about 15 years, but more federal, and I just still, even though the Prime Minister doesn't have oversight with the states, he still, in my view, has a moral duty of care to actually stand up and say, to call him out. But this is all political, just pure, unadulterated political rubbish of they're all coming up for election next year.
So do you guys have term limits on your politicians? Okay.
And we should. So much.
So how long, I mean, so he could be prime minister forever, basically.
The premiers are like equivalent to your governors. Mm-hmm. So he could, yes, he could. He's going to an election, I think, next March. I believe so.
Now, the interesting thing you said was people were trying to get, where do people, are there others, are states in Australia, are some of them not as bad as others? I mean, are there still areas where people would flee to?
Well, that's a tough one, Ben, because in Western Australia, which is our largest geographic state where all the mining goes on, they have fairly draconian public health orders themselves. And the Premier of Western Australia, there has long been a feeling in WA that they would one day secede because they feel a bit robbed with the GST, the goods and services tax, because they don't feel they get equal share. They're the biggest geographic and they produce all the mining manufacturing. So he has become so parochial that there's often talk, sometimes murmurs of shutting the state to everyone. Now, he did close, he said that no one from New South Wales can go to WA for Christmas. He won't let anyone in, even if they're vaccinated. The level of hysteria around this, for these premiers to keep everybody safe from a virus with the 99.97% survival, not even affected rate, is alarming. It's over the top. Now, New South Wales they lost, you may have heard, the Premier there, who was navigating the state extremely sensibly and wasn't going hard like Andrews was in Victoria. Overnight, she flipped and suddenly it became draconian, similar to what Andrews was doing. She had to resign, or she did resign 6 weeks ago because she was having a corruption commission hearing and she said she was going to step aside so it wouldn't interfere. We got a new Premier. He made himself look like he was going to open up the state, get rid of the quarantine camps, do everything. He hasn't really been much different. He's now shifted the goalposts up from 80% vaccination to 95% vaccination.
Now, you said quarantine camps. That's not just a meme, I guess. It's a real thing over there?
Yes, it is. Not something you really want to think about too much, is it? Because it's like you think in blocks that things don't worry you too much, whether that could really happen. But they are building one so I'm in Brisbane, which is the capital city of Queensland, and a regional centre about an hour and a half in from us. It's the largest inland city. Just outside of there, they're building one at the moment. It's supposed to be finished in late next year or early 23, one or the other. And they're building one near the airport, which is only about 20 minutes from me. And in New South Wales, they were going to, but he said he's not doing those anymore. And Victoria is going ahead with some as well. Now, they are saying our Premier here in Queensland did an interview and she said, yes, they will be used for people who are unvaccinated, but it's a bit open-ended. That could, and in the next breath, they say it's for people coming back into the country who may not be vaccinated. I'm not panicking too much about that at the moment because I think there'd have to be a lot more of them to house the people that really, I don't believe the government figures. They're telling us that 3 out of 4 people have had it. So double jabbed, but that, I'm just not seeing that. And everyone I know isn't either. If you were doing polls, for example, how they do their polling, that just, the numbers don't equate.
So, so we've got quarantine camps, but at the same time, you said that you've got massive numbers of first responders, police, EMS, firefighters, etc., who are turning down and standing up and fighting against all of these mandates and the draconian measures. You said that these premiers are going to be up for election, which is why they are acting the way that they are acting. And to me, that just kind of flies in the face, because over here, stateside, we have one of our governors in New Jersey, Phil Murphy, is up for re-election, and one of his chief campaign staffers was caught on hidden camera by Project Veritas saying that although Phil Murphy was very lukewarm to the idea of any kind of vaccine or lockdowns, once he became reelected as governor, he was going to clamp down just right away. So unless I misheard you, you're saying that it seems like the premiers are tightening the grip because they perceive that that's what people want. Did
Yes.
I get that right?
You got that right. That is what the public opinion, that is what we're being told on the mainstream MSN, is exactly the same issue you're having over there. It's just propaganda. No journalist asks these premiers questions about the whole idea of the virus having its, not that I want to get into the virus, but this whole thing is based on that. So the 99.97, no one's asked that to say, well, does that really warrant you keeping on going with these quarantine camps? Because I just really believe they all live in this bubble, and the bubble has become extremely, not elusive either. It's just a draw card. It's like it seduces them. And over the years, I think they have it all too easy, and they're tucked away together in their own environment. And I know that because I've spoken to a couple of federal MPs who I know, and I keep challenging them. I'm not in the political scene anymore, but I know them, and I challenge them and I ask them, give them examples of things, and they just don't see it. They say, oh, well, I spoke to so-and-so in my electorate and they said it's really good and they're thankful that we're looking after them and the state premiers are doing this. It's just so disconnected, because we're in small business. We know all sorts of different people, and the story is the same no matter who you talk to. That's not the same. It's not the same as what we're being told. It's very much a matter of optics from the mainstream news, which none of us will watch, of course, anymore. And the division, the similarities we have with you guys, and everywhere, we've got the division, we've got the talk of the vaccine passports and all of those things and lockdowns. But where Australia's standing out, and the real worry is what's happened in Victoria, and what will that mean for the other states? Because the others, 2 or 3 of the other states have the same side of politics as their leader, so they'll follow. And our federal government they're Liberal, but they're equal to your Republicans. So they're playing politics against each other.
It seems to me that I think part of the issue is how you said they have nowhere to run away to. Here in the States, you have, here in the United States, some of the states have never had a lockdown. Like here in Nebraska, we've never really had a lockdown, no mask mandates, and our cases are dropping. So it really screws up the narrative. You have all these people that are still huddling in their houses in California, and we're just over here living our best lives without a mask on, where it seems like you don't have that example in Australia. So that makes me wonder, does your media filter out like images of these Americans in stadiums with no mask on, just enjoying life? Do you guys see that?
We see it on all our social media feeds, and we're careful. I mean, I'm always very careful about who it is I follow, and I always, because I'm a researcher, I back everything up and I go and look at it from a primary source. We all see all your football games. You know, that last one, was it in Florida, where that packed stadium? And I remember putting it up and going, wow, you know, this virus is pretty smart. You know, it discriminates cross country. I mean, it's insane. So yes, Ben, they do. We don't get anything. You wouldn't watch the MSN. I mean, they really are the enemy of the people.
Yeah.
Well, they're reaching a lot of people there, obviously. I mean, if they're all buying into it, it just seems so bizarre to me.
Well, it seems that way. There is always, the thing about Australians too is that sometimes we don't know until the thing actually happens, like our chance to vote again or something. It shows itself. Australians tend to be, you may both know this, we've had a reputation of being very laid back and very welcoming. It's a great country. And we all love America and Europe, and we're a great country. But what we're seeing here now in Victoria is very sad, because it's telling us that they're like that. But I'm still wondering deep down, when the chance comes for us to vote next year in our federal election, what will happen. Now, I'll give you an example. Labor and Liberal, which is Republican and Democrat, have ruled the place from the beginning. Before all of this happened, people did not join political parties. It just didn't happen. They left. You'd be hard pressed to get anyone to join them. Now, there's a new party started up called United Australia Party here. It's the chairman is Australia's richest man, Clive Palmer, who's a mining magnate. He happens to live in Queensland. And I don't know if you remember an MP called Craig Kelly, because he did make a lot of international news. I think he's been on a couple of the shows. He may have been on with Stu Peters once, I'm not sure, but I think he was. He left the Liberal Party, which is the party currently in government federally now, because he had a conscience and he was a person of conviction and he knew what was going on. He left, he went to the crossbench. He obviously worked with Clive Palmer, and he resurrected his political party that he'd had before, and Craig Kelly is the leader now. Now, in less than 2 months, they've gained 70,000 members. They are now the biggest political party in Australia, bigger than the Liberal Party, bigger than the Labor Party. Now, that is something, that's just not nothing. So that's telling me that people who are quiet, that don't tend to speak up like we all do here, they'll join, they will quietly do that, they'll work behind the scenes, but they're not prepared to take this anymore, because you can't scoff at that. Now, we've got a lot of hope pinned on them, and another party was the Liberal Democrats, which is really Australia's Libertarian Party. It's really quite small, though. They've actually been more content to have a few senators in the upper house, but they are also building and growing. And I believe a lot of Australians are hoping that the two of them will not blend together, but work together somehow to break Labor and Liberal. That has to be the aim. It's the only thing that they need to do. Now, can that be done? I mean, Liberal and Labor will probably help each other to keep the seats that they have, because they know they're going to be challenged by this juggernaut that is the UAP.
Wow, that is a lot of as two people, me and Ben are pretty involved in our own Libertarian Party here. To see a third party like that break out in such a mad fashion like that is actually pretty uplifting. And you are right. The Republicans and Democrats do the exact same thing here, where they'll fight like cats and dogs until some third player enters the game, and then they'll shake hands behind the scenes and do everything they can to maintain the status quo. And really, it's like I think the saying is like the Democrats are driving us towards the cliff, and the Republicans are driving us towards the cliff at the speed limit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true. I don't doubt that that's what will happen, and I'm sure that the United Australia Party and the Liberal Democrats will be well aware of that behind the scenes. I mean, I don't know. I'm not really involved with them, but it's going to be interesting, and that does give me some hope. I mean, there are days you think you don't have any, and you think what happened in Victoria is so alarming, because we can never forget these things have precedent. It's not, I tell people this all the time. They say, oh, Jerry, we're living in this modern world. Well, the modern world, what is it? I mean, look at the Romans, the Greeks and the Persians, and everybody left us. Their mathematical genius, with their astronomy, they weren't dills, these people, and they fell. Their civilizations fell. We are not that superior that it can't happen.
Well, and you brought up Rome, and often in the Roman Empire, I mean, they had laws governing them, and sometimes the emperors would just decide not to follow them, and as long as the people were okay with it, it was fine. And that's kind of mirrors what you were saying about Australia. I mean, as long as everybody's fine with the premiers throwing the laws away, it's going to happen.
Well, clearly people are, but what is very alarming is when you hear a press conference with Daniel Andrews, the Premier of Victoria. I try not to listen to most of them, but I get snippets and I watch here and there. But the last one I watched was when somebody asked him about a person, what if they don't get vaccinated and they have to go to work? And he stared down the barrel of the camera and said, well, they just don't have a job. No, that's just what it is. You've got to get jabbed or you don't work. And I remember thinking, am I on a different planet? And even the sheep and the people that are so afraid that this is the plague, can't they see that? But they clearly don't. They're so afraid, and the propaganda coming out of the mainstream media has worked so well, except when as I said, the proof will be in the pudding once we get to the election. And it already is in a way with the numbers that the UAP have garnered and the Lib Dems, but nowhere near those numbers. So I believe there is hope. I just hope Dominion voting machines don't come to the country. Will they? I mean, really, we have to be realistic.
So, not to rain on anybody's parade or get blackpilled or anything, but the massive breakout of the UAP and the possible coalition of the Liberal Democrats.
Oh, well, I wouldn't do a coalition. They're separate parties, but a lot, just like the people, are hoping that they will work together.
Right. Like a similar thing happened several years ago in Great Britain with the Brexit party. The Conservatives, they were sitting on their ass, and UKIP was they were kind of they were there, but they were kind of fizzling out. And then all of a sudden there was this massive push for the Brexit party, and then the Brexit happened, and then they just kind of went away after that happened. They're like, our work here is done, and we got our one issue passed. Is the UAP a similar thing? Is it just we're going to stop this tyrannical lockdown mandate rule by fiat that the premiers and the prime minister is doing, and then once that's done, we're going to ride off into the sunset? Or is the UAP one of these things that you think is going to kind of stick around and maybe be the political town sheriff to make sure everybody stays in line?
I believe the latter. Craig Kelly, who is the federal member in one of the seats in New South Wales, who left the government and did this. It's no easy thing when your colleagues from your own party will, shun you and all that. There's all that involved. I don't believe he will. He's already putting out notices and emails and letters saying what they're intending to do, and it all is intent. But look, we have to believe in something. You just have to have some degree of hope to get you over this hurdle to see. He's talking about looking at the Constitution, making sure that we revisit that. Now, I better not say whether he said a Bill of Rights, but I think other people are suggesting. So it may well be that they'll look at that. Definitely, they want a Royal Commission. I don't know what a Royal Commission will really achieve, but they want a Royal Commission. They're committed to that if they were to win government. Anything is possible. The outcome maybe could be to hold the balance of power, but they could win. I don't write anything off. And this might be the big test of the Australian spirit. So we should talk again after the federal election because it'll be interesting to see. I'm hoping that the Australian spirit will rise. And though they are covering the whole thing, they are very committed to aiming to either govern or hold the balance of power where they'll have a lot more pull on anything like that, where they can stop the lockdowns, get rid of mandates. He doesn't want mandates. It's definitely a choice. If you don't have choice over your bodily autonomy, it's game over. As far as I'm concerned, that's it. It's done.
Right. Yeah. That kind of boils down to everything. Because if you don't have sovereignty over your own body, then what is the purpose of arguing about taxes or gun control or any of that others? None of that stuff matters, because if you give up, you forfeit your right to bodily autonomy to the state, then you don't have a leg to stand on in any other political argument. And I'm not going to be given advice to foreign countries' politicians or political figures or anything, but if you don't make that argument, if any of your people that are running for these offices are listening to me right now, if you're going to make any argument, that is the singular argument against what's going on over there right now. Bodily autonomy is everything right now.
100% agree. It's what I argue on every time. There are a couple of politicians speaking out, and one in particular, he's a senator from my state in Queensland, and I'm sure the government probably don't like it, but he's doing it because he is a man of conviction, and he's making waves, speaking up loudly, clearly, and that's a good thing. So it's going to be very interesting. We are supposed to be having a federal election. The latest we can have it, unlike you who have yours scheduled every 4 years, there's a 3-year period, but they can have it within, I think it's like a 3-month leeway either side. May is the latest we can have it. March seems to be the date that I keep hearing. Some people are even talking that maybe he'll call it for December, but he's left. I think the Prime Minister left last night to go to Glasgow. Chime in with all of that as well, as if we don't have enough problems. But I don't think he's got enough time yet, because now it's nearly November. I think it's too late. He's lost that window. We normally have a 6-week election, which probably horrifies you guys because you have a 12. Yeah, they're exciting to watch. We have 6 weeks generally. They can have 4, I believe, but usually it's 6.
Now you've talked about things that people can do. Now your states are massive, aren't they? I mean, like Queensland is probably like what, a size of maybe a quarter of the U.S.
Yeah, our states are fairly big.
Now, is there any mechanism that you guys have to, like, say somebody wanted to start a new state, or is that just outright banned?
Well, that's an interesting question, because some years back I came across a document that and I haven't got it on me, so I'll go and look it up. And if we talk again, I'll raise it with you. That there is a trigger in there or some capacity in there to divide Australia into the future into about 51 states. Now, that was some years ago that I read that somebody must have mapped that it's possible to do, perhaps down the track, because we're such a vast land with, we inhabit mostly the East Coast. So, and, then a bit on Western Australia on the bottom and along. There is, when I used to work for a regional newspaper in New South Wales, and we used to talk back then of getting rid of the state governments, keeping the federal government, but divesting it of so much control and having regional governments. So when that would feed into that idea of having 51, whether it's 51 or whether it was 35 or 40, whatever, you could divide it up. That means the elected people are closer to their constituents. It would be a fairer one. It would get rid of that third layer, because we've got council, state and federal. Too much government for a country so small with 26 million people. Mm-hmm. The lap is ridiculous. And I think we used to talk about that a lot. Now, interestingly, I heard Craig Kelly, the leader of the United Australia Party, say that they actually would like to look at that as well. So that's another tick for them. So, I think that'd be a great way to go forward if we can keep our country, if we can.
Well, and another thing too with people, and it gets brought up quite a bit, they're like, well, Australia wouldn't be in this mess if they had kept their weapons.
That was that goes back. I suppose I have to be careful what I say, but I'm a historian. So when I studied political history as well. So the Enlightenment thinkers were always saying that, the Thomas Paines and Hobbes, and even before that, Montesquieu. It's about if you allow your government to keep their weapons, you can't have them. Well, how's that right? But, this is the whole thing. Australia was, portrayed, and we grew up in we're way down under, we're such a knockabout free country. I think when it happened, I was reasonably young when it happened. I remember when it happened. John Howard was the Liberal Prime Minister at the time, and when they did it. And I just remember, because I was living in regional New South Wales, and so we knew a lot of farming families, and that was, caused a lot of problems among them. They were allowed to keep some, I believe, but it was strange to me when I remember back then. And I'm for it. I wish we had is it the Second Amendment? Mm-hmm. It's yeah.
Well, the thing that's so weird to me is if I was in a country where China was 2 island hops away, I'd want every damn citizen to have a couple guns. I mean, what is the attitude in Australia toward China? It's just like, well, if they decide to come down, we're just screwed. So whatever.
They're very, well, again, we come back to this. That's why I'm always careful what we get told, but we don't know underneath what's going on. But it seems to me the public opinion is they're apathetic. And as far as the gun issue, that most Australians, we don't need guns. Why do we need guns? Most Australians appear to be saying that. So, it is, it's scary. We do. It is a real threat. And the majority, I believe it's a bit like this issue of they're all keeping us safe. If we start to wake up and start challenging, well, why is this happening? That means you're going to have to question all this other stuff. And for most people, it's just too hard.
Yeah, that's the cognitive dissonance of, once you start down the rabbit hole, you can either accept that everything that you've been told throughout your life has been a lie and then just kind of roll with it, or you can stay comfortably ignorant and just keep on floating through life. Not to get too far off into the rabbit hole as far as China being right there, or rather, I
Oh,
should say
West Taiwan. Correct.
West Taiwan. Yes, we've
Yeah.
said it. West Taiwan. Sorry, that's our code word that we got to use because we'll get kicked off of
Okay.
Facebook. But as far as West Taiwan being right there, I've read some stories over the past year or so that West Taiwanese warships are dropping anchor in Australian ports, and I've also heard of something called the Belt and Road Initiative that the federal government has signed on, which is basically linking you guys at the hip with what some type of economic stimulus or infrastructure plan or something. I didn't look too deeply into it because it doesn't affect me, but if you want to elaborate on that, that would be great.
I can't allow. I'm not an international relations expert, but the Belt and Road was not a federal issue. That was another Daniel Andrews little baby that he did with all his visits to China as a state. Now, for the life of me, I just can't accept. They said that what we've been told was that he did it without the federal government's knowledge, because anything to do with international relations is a federal matter. States don't do. I mean, they do other simple things like all states do, have sister relationships, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't see that could have ever been done without the knowledge of someone in the federal government. There were at least Foreign Affairs and Trade or something like that. But that's what we're being told. And anyway, it hadn't. Scott Morrison ripped that up recently. That the Belt and Road deal that Daniel Andrews had done. I mean, he wouldn't have had any other choice, because, as I said earlier, Victoria is currently the only state engaged in that Strong Cities network, which is very closely aligned with the UN and I think with China and WEF and all the rest of them. But the warship thing. Well, yeah, again, I can't really comment because I don't like talking about things that I'm not really across. But yeah, it is an issue. Taiwan is something we have to watch, and we are close. We're in the Asia Pacific region, and but we're the US's closest ally too. It doesn't serve the US's interest for us to be, just walk on in either. So, but that's such a huge area.
Yeah, with the mandates and the lockdowns and the heavy-handed authoritarianism, and now with you just telling me that Premier Andrews is kind of going off the reservation, doing things at the state level that really should be handled at the federal level, making infrastructure deals with let's just say outright a hostile foreign power. What is going on? Like, is this guy just like full-blown treasonous, or is he an idiot? Is he getting taken for a ride? Like, what is his why?
It's the $1 million question, isn't it? Everybody I know, we all say, how? How did it happen? How? Were we that asleep? Australia's got, sometimes you hear, you read or you get told things, how, you're all dumb down there. Well, no, it's not true. We're not dumb down there. We're awake and alert and well-travelled, worldly nation. But personally, I believe that, especially as it has studying history so far back for such a long time, I believe that the modern world, we've just become so complacent. We've had it very good. In my opinion, if you don't have a good degree of adversity in your life, whether it's personal or as a nation, you'll just get lazy and you won't fight for what you believe in. You've got to always fight, because we all know here freedom isn't free. And we've become extremely complacent in this country, for sure. And there are only really a minority of us prepared to really fight for this. And what has been interesting is that just even in my own area here, that and because I've done and worked on a lot of campaigns for over 15 years, I know the area, I know the people in the other parties. Some of them, not all of them, there's just a few, have dropped. So we're ideologically opposed on so many things, but we have all come together on this issue and forgotten about all of that. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, Hobbs, about bodily autonomy. If you don't have that, you have nothing. That has been another really amazing thing, because there are people that I wouldn't have aligned myself with or been considered friends with before, that we're on the same page here now. We know that without freedom, forget about anything else. There's no room to have a discussion about an idea, let alone a policy, without that first. So, you know, it's these are extremely interesting times. Now we are living up here thinking now, my greatest hope is that the leaders of this state and the other states will look at Victoria and go, we'd be stupid to do that, to go down that road. But, you know, I don't know anymore. I really don't. Nothing. We can't really be sure of anything except making plans for yourself to make sure your family are safe and that you're still able to live the life you want to live as a free person.
Well, and you said something, you know, maybe they've become complacent because they're too easy, but I looked up, I thought, well, maybe Australia doesn't have as much of a rural population as America, where, you know, it's a little harder to live in, but you guys have 27% rural, and the United States is only like 19. So I don't understand. It seems to me like rural Australia would be a tough place to live.
Well, it's the central part of Australia, and I mean, I haven't been there, but it's really, you know, where all the big cattle stations are in central Queensland and up South Australia, Northern Territory, and up in the Kimberleys. It's, yeah, that's tough. That would be tough country, but it is we do have some great regional centres. I grew up in a regional town in New South Wales, city really, 65,000 people. It's not that small, but Queensland, where I am now and have been for a long time, we are the most decentralised of all the states. Mm-hmm. So the saying goes that anywhere up above, probably an hour above me, and then anything up above that going up to far north Queensland, they're a lot more real there as far as this situation's concerned. They don't buy in. This is what I've been told. So it's the cities that are being hit the hardest, except that our Premier last week announced that she was, I believe that they were going to get tougher on the regions because the jabbed rate's not up high enough. So it's just scaremongering, you know, and I don't think they'd win. That's tough country up there. You know, those people are real people. And I grew up, the region I grew up in, central New South Wales, people were real there. Although I've been told the biggest township is buying into it a bit with the fear.
Wow, that's from what I know about Australia's geography, it's like you got cities, and then you've got a lot of like nothing, where there's not any people. Like the outback is world famous as being untamed and nobody living out there, and you could probably, you know, walk for days without seeing another human face or whatever. Just as kind of a hypothetical, do you have any knowledge of any groups or people that you might know that are possibly considering using that wild, untamed country as kind of a fallback? You know, if things get so bad in the populated areas, is there like I don't know if you have the same parlance over there, but we call it a bug out.
Yes,
bug out plan.
Yeah, no, there are groups forming. You hear people tell you various groups. There's some Telegram channels have started. I believe I've heard of about 2 in central Queensland, 1 in Tasmania, 1 in Western Australia. I'm sure they're everywhere. People making plans. They call them prepping here, but yep. Same thing. It's they're calling it off-grid living. Some people are trying to get enough people to create communities where they can sustain. And some of them are looking at it just short term in the hope that we will get our country back, or others are just going with no end date. So yes, that is definitely happening. I mean, I was told recently in the US about something personally I wouldn't mind knowing more about, is that Free State project you have over there. But one of the fellows that I know said that he thinks that I don't think we'd be able to set it up. It's probably our constitution is different or whatever I'm not sure. We haven't looked into it, but I had a look at the Free State project the other week. And I thought, well, see, that would be appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't know how you guys would do that with those massive states. The state they picked was New Hampshire, which is fairly small. And when they first started thinking about that project, they picked mostly smaller states. I know Wyoming was one of the states, but they thought they'd have a hard time getting people to move to Wyoming. Wyoming is kind of probably comparable to your central Australia, but there's snow and wind.
Yeah.
So New Hampshire's got a coast and forest, and they're making progress there. So yeah, it does appear that actually works, but I don't know how you would do that on a scale in Australia. You'd almost have to do you have like counties? You'd almost have to start with a county and.
Well, they have what would be equivalent to our council areas. And at the moment, Ben, the other big problem with Australia, and I don't know how it is in the States because I don't know enough about it, but we are so over-governed in this country, and it increasingly over the last couple of decades just got worse and worse. I mean, nanny state is an understatement. Really, it's out of control, the regulation. It's just regulation on top of regulation. And it's like to give you an idea, most of the people in small business that we know say the same as us. Particularly the last 10 years, it's just been almost impossible to get ahead. And my husband used to always say, we're working harder even and getting nowhere. In the last 20 years, if you look at how the whole thing's set up, the taxes are out of control. We're taxed to the hilt. Too many layers of government regulation. I mean, they come into the parliament with things like this or give them to the MPs. They're massive piles of legislation, and that would have to go before we ever started getting some sort of real autonomy back among the ordinary people.
Well, Australia's about the same size population as California. It's almost like if California was a country, is what you guys have become.
See, and it is a sunburnt country. We don't have that same geography. One of the things I was so looking forward to, and we were due to fly to the US, our first trip last April, was going to see the redwood trees and all Yosemite and all of that sort of thing. We only had time to do the West Coast, but it's amazing. The totally different geography. So as you said, we wouldn't be able to, because to set up projects like that, you really do need to be near water and have some sort of facility, because that's what they did in the ancient world. They always went for where the rivers were, and they needed the transported around the Mediterranean, and so it would be very difficult. But some people will try, and good luck to them.
Well, I guess we're getting up on an hour, Hobbs. And Jerry, since you're a Roman history buff, where is Australia in the Roman timeline? Where if Australia was Rome?
Oh, if Australia was Rome. Well, if Australia was Rome, I can talk Victoria. Let's take Victoria, and Daniel Andrews has put on his laurel wreath, right? And he has declared himself dictator in perpetuity. In 44 BC, that's what happened with Julius Caesar. He declared himself dictator of Rome forever, which has then led to his 23 stabs in the forum. So,
It is so mumuch classier to compare a modern politician to Julius Caesar than it is to Hitler. And I am so glad we went there.
Well, actually, it's much safer. I mean, I don't go to that one either because so many people, the whole PC thing, they make you out, we won't go there. That's why I love the Roman history. I always get away with it because it's 2,000 years ago.
Yeah,
and we're watching it unfold right again.
Oh, well, I'm watching it unfold in Victoria, so...
And you said your expertise isn't post-empire, so I won't ask you your impression of where the United States is at. So
no, mine's Republic, the Republic. But, when they wrote about the Republic, in the primary sources, the historians who wrote them all referred to the Republic as an empire. Today, we don't call anyone who says the Roman Empire will always think from Augustus forward. But I was used to saying the empire when I was studying and writing. So, yeah.
All right. Well, Hobbs, you want to close this out?
Yeah, I just one of our guys over here says that no thanks to the mainstream media, the world sees what's going on in Australia. At least we in other parts of the Anglosphere are watching. Y'all aren't alone. And I would like to leave you with some words of encouragement. We have within the last, I think, week or so, I believe the count was roughly 10,000 people in New York City were protesting outside of the Australian consulate to the conditions that are going on over there. It's it's all one fight. We all come from the same stock and the same cultural heritage. It's a little bit different. We're all in this together. It's as one of our founding fathers once said, it's we all have to hang together, or surely we will hang separately.
Well, if it gets too bad, Jerry, I saw where we're going to give 450,000 to illegal immigrants. If you can find your way to Mexico and change your name to Alejandra and dye your hair black, that might be the way to go.
I have heard of people wanting to go to Mexico, but I love the US. I mean, if it came to that, how do you get asylum? Is there political asylum going on west from Australia? I don't know.
Just get in illegally and get your check. You'll be good to go.
All right. Well, that's thanks for telling me that. Anyway, it's good.
Yes. Before we sign off for the night, why don't you tell everybody if you've got like Twitter or Instagram, Facebook, anything like that? Tell people where they can find you, follow your content, maybe support you and the people that you know in your fight in any way.
Yeah. Well, my Twitter is my big thing, my platform. It's Watchtower Rome. So there you go, Ben. No surprises there. Who will watch the Watchers?
Right, exactly.
So, Watchtower Rome, I am at, and another one to follow is the Australian Liberty Network, ALN, which is being set up at the moment. We're on Twitter now, just new, but the website's being set up with quite a few. Now, I'd have to send it to everybody's handle. I know Liberty Down Under is one. There's Jack Eckerley, but I'd have to spell them out for you. So there's a few of us involved in getting the liberty movement in Australia much more highlighted. I mean, we all love the great Ron Paul. And we do have another Lady ANCAP I've done a couple of talks with her. She's a great supporter of Australia as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. Very good. So, you got that there at Watchtower Rome over on the Twitter sphere. We, of course, are at Rhodes, 2liberty.com. If you want to support us, throw some money our way, get yourself some Liberty swag. You can also go to think-liberty.com or find us on YouTube and Facebook at the Roads to Liberty podcast. Check out our back catalog. It's always fun having these types of conversations.
It's great. I loved it. Thank you so much.
Something else I want to push, Hobbs. The platform that we do our stream through sent me an email. Hey, you've got followers. Do you want to be an Amazon influencer? So that might be something we'll be putting up shit that we buy or look at, and you can go see it. And if it's something you like, buy it, and we get like 4%. So be watching for that coming out.
Well, we'll all be in the ALN. We'll be retweeting this.
Great.
Show. You'll be getting lots of attention there as well. But it was great to have. Thank you for having me on. It was really good to meet you both, and hopefully we can talk again.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Keep us updated on after the federal elections. We'll have you back on, and you can give us a breakdown of everything that happened over there. So, everybody, from us over here at Roads to Liberty, I'm Hobbs. That's Ben over there. There we go. And our special guest tonight, Jerry from Australia. Thank